Victoria Sterling's designer heel struck the hangar floor like a judge's gavel. She pointed one manicured finger directly at the black man in faded overalls, her voice slicing through the morning air loud enough for every technician, every engineer, every soul in that hangar to hear. "Are we waiting for a real pilot? Or should I ask the janitor to put down his mop and fly my $200 million jet?" Laughter exploded. Cruel, deliberate, deafening. The man's 8-year-old son pressed harder against his father's leg, tears burning his eyes. Marcus Thompson said nothing. He just listened. To the engine. To the sound nobody else could hear. The sound of death waiting to happen. What Victoria didn't know? In exactly 47 minutes, she would beg that janitor to save her life. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The alarm on Marcus Thompson's phone buzzed at 4:47 a.m. Same as every morning for the past 3 years. He didn't hit snooze. Never did. That was a luxury for men who had someone else to pick up the slack. And Marcus Thompson had been picking up his own slack since the day Denise walked out, and never looked back. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feet hitting the cold floor of the small apartment. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. Kitchen so narrow 2 people couldn't pass without touching shoulders. But it was clean. It was paid for. And it was 5 minutes from Jalen's elementary school. That last part was the only thing that mattered. "Dad?" Marcus turned. Jalen stood in the doorway, pajamas wrinkled, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Go back to bed, son. It's early." "I heard you get up." Jalen rubbed his eyes. "Can I come with you today? It's teacher work day. No school." Marcus paused, calculated. The airfield didn't technically allow children, but Jalen had been coming with him on off-school days since he was 5. The boy knew to stay quiet, stay out of the way, stay invisible, just like his father. "Get dressed," Marcus said. 15 minutes. Don't forget to brush your teeth." Jalen's face lit up. "Yes, sir." The boy disappeared down the hallway, and Marcus allowed himself a small smile. 41 years old, single father, janitor at a private airfield that serviced jets worth more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. But his son still looked at him like he hung the moon. Some men had less. The drive to Sterling Aerospace's private facility took 22 minutes at this hour. No traffic, no chaos. Just Marcus and Jalen and the soft hum of the old Honda Civic that had somehow survived 200,000 miles. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Tommy Bradshaw said his dad flies planes. Big ones. For Delta." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "That's good. Flying's a good job." "Tommy said janitors are losers." The words hung in the air. Marcus felt them land somewhere in his chest, in that place where he kept all the things he didn't let himself feel during daylight hours. "What do you think?" Marcus asked. Jalen was quiet for a moment. "I think Tommy's dad isn't home for dinner. Like, ever. His mom told my teacher." Marcus glanced at his son. 8 years old and already understanding things that took most men decades to figure out. "Tommy's dad works hard," Marcus said carefully. "He provides for his family. That's honorable. But there's different ways to measure a man, Jalen. Some people measure by titles. Some measure by money. Some measure by the size of the house or the car in the driveway. How do you measure?" Marcus pulled into the airfield entrance, waving at the security guard who barely glanced up from his phone. "I measure by who shows up," Marcus said. "Who's there when it matters? Who keeps their word even when it costs them something?" Jalen nodded slowly, processing. "So, you're not a loser?" Marcus parked the Civic in the employee lot, the far lot, the one without the shade trees. the one where the paint lines were faded and nobody bothered to fix the potholes. "I'm here, aren't I?" Marcus said. "Every single day. For you." Jalen smiled. "Yeah, you are." The hangar was quiet at 5:30 a.m. Marcus liked it that way. The massive space held 3 aircraft at present, 2 corporate jets belonging to regular clients, and the crown jewel, Victoria Sterling's personal Gulfstream G650, the Venture 2. $200 million of engineering perfection, sitting there like a sleeping dragon. Marcus grabbed his cleaning cart, loaded it with supplies, and began his rounds. Jalen settled into his usual spot near the back wall, pulling out his sketchbook and colored pencils. The boy had a thing for drawing aircraft. Not childish scribbles, actual detailed renderings with labeled parts. Wings, ailerons, tail fins. Marcus had never told Jalen where that talent came from. Never explained why the drawings were so accurate, so precise, so technically correct for an 8-year-old who'd never had a single lesson. Some truths were buried for a reason. He was sweeping near the nose wheel of the Venture 2 when he heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible, a high-pitched whistle from somewhere deep in the aircraft's fuselage, the kind of sound that most people would dismiss as background noise. The HVAC system, the building settling. But Marcus Thompson wasn't most people. He stopped, tilted his head, listened. The whistle came again, slightly different frequency this time, accompanied by something else. A subtle vibration he felt more than heard, traveling through the concrete floor and up into his work boots. Marcus set down his broom, walked slowly around the aircraft, stopped at the main wheel well and crouched down, pressing his palm flat against the cold metal. There. The vibration was clearer now. Rhythmic. Wrong. He knew that rhythm. He'd felt it before, 15 years ago, in the cockpit of an F-16 that had tried to kill him somewhere over the Nevada desert. The aircraft's hydraulic system had been failing. A thermal warping issue in the primary flow regulator that the onboard computers hadn't detected because they were looking for the wrong symptoms. The computers saw data. Marcus had felt the machine dying. He'd landed that F-16 with manual hydraulic override, no flight controls, nothing but instinct, and 10,000 hours of training. The debrief lasted 6 hours. The commendation ceremony lasted 10 minutes. The divorce papers arrived 3 months later. Denise said she couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't sit at home, wondering if today was the day she'd get the call. Couldn't raise a son who might grow up without a father because his father loved adrenaline more than his family. She wasn't wrong. So Marcus had made a choice. Hung up his flight suit, let his ATP license gather dust in a locked drawer. Took a job that would never make headlines, never earn medals, never put his face on recruitment posters. A job that let him drop Jalen off at school every morning and pick him up every afternoon. A job that made him invisible. He stood up slowly, studying the Venture 2 with new eyes. The aircraft was scheduled for a critical flight today. He'd seen it on the maintenance board. Victoria Sterling had a merger meeting in Zurich. Wheels up at 9 a.m. No delays, no excuses. Marcus walked to the maintenance terminal in the corner of the hangar. Logged in with his credentials, the same credentials that gave him access to submit work orders and flag issues, but not enough clearance to actually fix anything beyond changing light bulbs and emptying trash cans. He typed slowly, choosing his words with the precision of a man writing his last testament. Pressure fluctuation consistent with pre-failure thermal warping in primary hydraulic flow regulator housing. Recommend immediate manual inspection and pressure stabilization before engine start. Failure predicted upon sustained high-thrust demand. Requires physical diagnostic, not software calibration. Urgent. He submitted the report, watched it disappear into the system. Knew with absolute certainty that no one would read it. Because who checks maintenance logs from the janitor? By 7 a.m., the hangar had transformed. Technicians swarmed the Venture 2 like ants on a sugar cube. 4 senior engineers, the best Victoria Sterling's money could buy, argued in a cluster near the cockpit, their voices sharp with frustration and barely concealed panic. Marcus swept nearby, listening, watching, staying invisible. "The DAU is throwing intermittent faults," one engineer said. Michael, according to his name badge, lead avionics specialist. 6 figures a year to interpret data from machines. "We need to cycle the power bus. It's a redundancy conflict." "That's idiotic," snapped another engineer. Sarah, telemetry expert. Hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "The DAU output is clean. It's the PFCC overcompensating. We need to reboot and recalibrate." "We've already rebooted twice." "Then we reboot again." Marcus kept sweeping. The whistle from the aircraft was louder now, louder than it had been 2 hours ago. The thermal warping was progressing. The machine was screaming for help in the language these engineers didn't speak. They were trained to read screens. Marcus was trained to read metal. The hangar doors opened, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Not literally, but every person in that space felt the chill of Victoria Sterling's presence before they saw her. She moved like a woman who had never been told no. 53 years old, but carried herself like she was still the 30-year-old shark who had clawed her way from analyst to CEO through sheer force of will and the complete unwillingness to accept anything less than total victory. Her heels clicked against the concrete. Her assistant, a nervous young man clutching a tablet, scrambled to keep pace. "Someone explain to me," Victoria said, her voice carrying across the hangar, "why my aircraft is not prepared for departure." Michael stepped forward. "Miss Sterling, we've identified an intermittent sensor fault in the primary flight systems. We're running diagnostics now." "Intermittent," Victoria repeated, making the word sound like a disease. "Intermittent means you don't actually know what's wrong. We're narrowing down the possibilities. I don't pay you for possibilities. I pay you for solutions." Victoria checked her watch. Diamond encrusted, worth more than Marcus's annual salary. "My meeting in Zurich is in 4 hours. The entire Hendrix merger depends on my physical presence. Do you understand what's at stake?" "Yes, ma'am, but the safety protocols..." "Safety protocols," Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Find the fault. Fix the fault. Get my aircraft in the air." "Is that simple enough?" Michael nodded rapidly. "Yes, ma'am. We'll have an answer within the hour." Victoria's eyes swept the hangar, cataloging every person, every tool, every obstacle between her and her destination. Her gaze landed on Marcus, still pushing his broom near the nose wheel. She stared at him for a long moment. The janitor, the invisible man, the one person in this hangar who wasn't scrambling to impress her. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe, that someone wasn't performing for her. "You," she said. Marcus looked up, met her eyes, said nothing. "Is there some reason you're cleaning the same spot you were cleaning when I arrived? Or are you paid by the hour to look busy?" A few technicians snickered. Sarah covered her mouth. "Just doing my job, ma'am," Marcus said. "Then do it somewhere else. You're in the way." Marcus nodded once, pushed his cart toward the far wall. Jalen looked up from his sketchbook, eyes wide, having heard everything. Marcus gave his son a small shake of his head. "Not now. Stay quiet." The boy looked down, kept drawing. The next 90 minutes were a masterclass in institutional failure. The engineers ran 17 different diagnostic programs. They rebooted systems, swapped sensor modules, recalibrated instruments. They argued, blamed, second-guessed, and ultimately accomplished nothing. The fault persisted. The hydraulic pressure display flickered with each engine test. The Venture 2 refused to give them the green light. And the whistle grew louder. Marcus heard it clearly now, that specific frequency resonance that meant metal was vibrating under thermal strain. The warping was accelerating. Whatever window existed for a safe repair was closing with every passing minute. He approached Simon, the chief engineer, who was standing apart from the others, rubbing his temples. "Sir?" Simon looked up, blinked, clearly trying to remember why the janitor was speaking to him. "I'm busy," Simon said. "Whatever it is, tell someone else." "I logged a maintenance report this morning about the hydraulic system. Did anyone review it?" Simon's expression shifted from dismissal to confusion. "Maintenance report? From you?" "Yes, sir. I flagged a potential thermal warping issue in the primary flow regulator. The pressure fluctuation isn't the sensor fault. It's a physical failure. The computer is reporting symptoms, but the root cause is mechanical." Simon stared at him. "And you know this? How?" Marcus hesitated. How much truth was he willing to reveal? How much of the man he used to be was he willing to resurrect? "I've seen it before," Marcus said carefully. "A long time ago. Different aircraft, same failure mode. The whistle you're hearing, that specific frequency, it means the metal housing is warping under thermal load. The system is fighting itself. If you force a takeoff—" "Wait," Simon held up a hand. "Whistle? What whistle?" "You don't hear it?" Simon shook his head. "I don't hear anything, except my career circling the drain. It's faint, high-pitched, coming from the fuselage near the main wheel well. That's where the primary regulator is housed. The sound is metal stress, microscopic fractures forming under thermal expansion. The pressure spikes you're seeing on the display are the system trying to compensate for reduced flow capacity. It's not a software bug. It's physics." Simon studied Marcus with new eyes. Not the dismissive glance of a man looking at a janitor, but the cautious assessment of a professional encountering an unknown variable. "Who are you?" Simon asked. Before Marcus could answer, Victoria's voice cut across the hangar. "Why is my aircraft still grounded?" She stormed toward the cluster of engineers, her assistant practically jogging to keep up. Her face was flushed with anger, her composure cracking under the weight of the ticking clock. "Ma'am, we're still running diagnostics," Michael started. "You've been running diagnostics for 2 hours. I need solutions." "The system won't clear for flight. The safety interlocks. Override them." Silence. Michael swallowed hard. "Ma'am, we can't override safety interlocks without confirming the fault is resolved. If the hydraulic system fails during flight, then find someone who can confirm it." Victoria spun, addressing the entire hangar. "I am surrounded by people I pay 6 figures a year, and not one of you can tell me why a brand new aircraft won't fly?" "It's not brand new." Every head turned. Marcus stood near his cleaning cart, broom in hand, looking directly at Victoria Sterling. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "The aircraft," Marcus said. "It's not brand new. It's the G650ER variant from the original production run. The hydraulic architecture in these early models had a known issue with thermal expansion in the primary flow regulator housing. The manufacturer issued a service bulletin 3 years ago, but it wasn't mandatory, so most operators ignored it." The silence in the hangar was absolute. Victoria took a step toward him, then another. Her heels echoed like gunshots. "And how," she said slowly, "would a janitor know that?" Marcus felt the weight of 15 years pressing down on him. The decorated service record, the commendations, the thousands of hours in cockpits that cost more than small countries. The man he used to be, the man he'd buried to keep his son safe. "I read," Marcus said. Laughter broke out, nervous, relieved, cruel. The engineer is grateful that attention had shifted. Victoria's mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You read," she repeated. "The janitor reads." "Yes, ma'am." "Tell me something." Victoria turned to address the crowd, playing to her audience. "Do they teach aerospace engineering at janitor school? Is there a course on hydraulic systems between mopping 101 and toilet cleaning advanced?" More laughter, louder this time. Someone actually applauded. Jalen looked up from his sketchbook. His father stood alone in the center of the hangar, surrounded by people laughing at him. The boy's hands trembled. His eyes burned. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing him wounded. "No, ma'am," he said. "They don't." Victoria stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell her perfume. Something expensive, probably French, probably worth more than his car. "Then let me explain something to you," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hangar. "I have 4 engineers with advanced degrees. I have technicians with decades of experience. I have the best diagnostic equipment money can buy. And you," she looked him up and down, taking in the faded overalls, the worn boots, the cleaning supplies. "You push a broom." She turned to the crowd, raising her voice for maximum effect. "Are we waiting for a real pilot? Or should I ask the janitor to put down his mop and fly my $200 million jet?" The laughter exploded. Cruel, deliberate, deafening. Marcus felt Jalen's eyes on him, felt his son watching him be humiliated in front of 50 people, felt the weight of every choice that had led him to this moment. Standing in a hangar with a broom in his hand, while a woman who didn't know his name used him as a punchline. He thought about his medals, locked in a box in his closet. He thought about his ATP license, gathering dust in a drawer. He thought about the sound of that F-16's engine screaming as he'd fought to keep it in the air, the desert floor rushing up at him, the certainty that he was about to die, and the absolute refusal to let that happen. He thought about Jalen and Denise, and the choice he'd made 3 years ago to become invisible. And then he heard it again, the whistle, louder now, much louder, accompanied by a deep vibration that he felt through the concrete floor. The Venture 2's engine was running. Someone had started it during Victoria's performance, trying to prove the system was functional. Marcus's head snapped toward the aircraft. His eyes found the main wheel well, where a thin sheen of fluid was beginning to weep from the inspection panel. Hydraulic fluid. The warping had progressed past the point of simple repair. The regulator housing was failing. The system was bleeding out. "Stop the engine," Marcus said. No one heard him over the laughter. "Stop the engine!" The hangar fell silent. Marcus was moving now, walking toward the aircraft with a purpose that transformed him. The janitor was gone. Something else had taken his place. Something harder, more focused, more dangerous. "What are you—" Michael started. "Shut it down, now!" Marcus pointed at the fluid dripping from the wheel well. "That's not condensation. That's hydraulic fluid. Your primary flow regulator is failing. If you keep that engine running, you'll burn out the pump and lose all hydraulic pressure. You can't just shut it down!" The authority in his voice was absolute. The kind of authority that came from years of command, years of life-or-death decisions, years of being the man other men looked to when everything was falling apart. Simon moved first. He ran to the cockpit, killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Victoria stared at Marcus. The amusement was gone from her face. replaced by something she hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. "What is happening?" she demanded. Marcus walked to the wheel well, crouched down, touched the fluid with 2 fingers, rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger, brought it to his nose. "Skydrol 500B4, he said. "High-performance hydraulic fluid, and it's hot, which means the system has been running under strain long enough to overheat the regulator housing." He stood, facing Simon. "Your thermal warping has progressed to stage 3. The housing is cracked. The pump is working overtime to maintain pressure, which is why your computer keeps throwing faults. It's trying to tell you the system is dying." "How do you know this?" Simon asked. Marcus met his eyes. "Because I've felt this exact failure mode before, in an aircraft doing 600 knots over the Mojave Desert. The difference is, I was in the cockpit when it happened." The words hung in the air. "Who are you?" Simon asked again. Marcus glanced at Jalen. The boy was watching him, sketchbook forgotten, eyes wide with something Marcus hadn't seen before: pride. "My name is Marcus Thompson," he said, turning back to face the crowd. "Before I took this job, I spent 15 years as a naval air test pilot. F-16s, F-22s, experimental stealth prototypes. I hold an ATP license and type rating for the Gulfstream 500 and 600 series. I have over 12,000 hours of flight time, including 3,000 hours in high-risk test environments." Silence. "I understand the hydraulic systems in this aircraft because I flew the prototypes that pushed those systems to failure. I know the sound of metal stress because I've heard it in cockpits where my life depended on recognizing it before the instruments did." He looked directly at Victoria Sterling. "I chose to become a janitor because my son needed a father who came home every night. I gave up my career, my prestige, and my identity so that I could be there for him. And I would make that choice again every single day without hesitation." Victoria's face had gone pale. "But right now," Marcus continued, "your aircraft is grounded because of a physical failure that your engineers don't know how to fix. Because they're trained to read computers, not machines. And if you try to fly that aircraft without addressing the root cause, you won't make it to Zurich. You'll be dead before you clear the runway." The hangar was absolutely silent. "So," Marcus said, "do you want to keep laughing at the janitor, or do you want me to save your life?" The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. Victoria Sterling stood frozen, her designer heels rooted to the concrete floor, staring at the man she had mocked not 5 minutes ago. The laughter that had filled the hangar was gone, replaced by something thick and suffocating. The collective held breath of 50 people who had just witnessed the impossible. Marcus Thompson didn't move, didn't blink, just waited. "You're lying," Victoria finally said, but her voice had lost its edge. "This is some kind of... You can't be..." "I'm not lying, Miss Sterling. A test pilot doesn't become a janitor. That's not how the world works." "The world works however we make it work." Marcus glanced at Jalen, still sitting against the far wall, sketchbook clutched to his chest. "I made my choice. I'd make it again." Michael, the lead avionics engineer, stepped forward. His face was a mess of conflicting emotions: skepticism, confusion, and something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "This is ridiculous," Michael said. "We're supposed to believe that our janitor is secretly a decorated military pilot? That's the plot of a bad movie." "Check my credentials," Marcus said. "FAA database. ATP license number 4729683. Type ratings for Gulfstream 500 and 600 series. Boeing 737, Lockheed Martin F-16, F-22. Naval service record available through the Department of Defense public database. Marcus Jerome Thompson, Lieutenant Commander, retired. Anyone can memorize numbers, Sarah snapped. Then verify them. Should take about 30 seconds. Simon was already moving toward the maintenance terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The rest of the hangar watched in silence, the tension building with each click of the keys. "Oh my God," Simon whispered. "What?" Victoria demanded. "What is it?" Simon turned slowly, his face pale. "He's telling the truth. All of it. ATP license, active status, medical current, type ratings matching what he said. And his military record." Simon paused, swallowing hard. "Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 air medals, Naval Test Pilot School class leader, 15 years of service with 0 flight violations." The hangar erupted in murmurs. Engineers exchanged glances. Technicians who had laughed at Marcus moments ago suddenly found the floor very interesting. Victoria's jaw tightened. "That doesn't explain why a decorated pilot is cleaning my hangar." "Does it matter?" Marcus asked. "Right now, your aircraft is bleeding hydraulic fluid. Your engineers can't diagnose the fault because they're looking in the wrong place. And your merger meeting starts in—" He checked the clock on the wall. 3 hours and 47 minutes. "The backup pilots," Victoria snapped, turning to her assistant. "Where are they?" The young man fumbled with his tablet. "Mandatory rest cycle, ma'am. FAA regulations. They flew in from Singapore yesterday and aren't legal to fly for another 6 hours." "Then find different pilots." "We've tried. Everyone qualified on this aircraft type is either booked or unavailable on short notice. The earliest we could get someone here is—" "I don't want to hear about earliest. I want solutions." "Miss Sterling," Marcus's voice cut through her tirade. "You're wasting time." Victoria spun toward him, her composure cracking further. "Excuse me? Every minute you spend yelling is a minute we're not fixing your aircraft. The thermal warping I identified is progressive. The longer that system sits with a compromised regulator, the worse the damage gets. At some point, maybe an hour from now, maybe 2, the damage becomes irreparable. The entire hydraulic assembly will need to be replaced. That's a 3-day job, minimum." 3 days? At minimum. Could be longer if the pump seized and damaged secondary systems. Victoria's face went through a rapid series of transformations. Anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally, something that looked almost like desperation. "What do you need?" she asked quietly. "To fix the aircraft or to fly it?" "Both." Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment. 3 years of invisibility, 3 years of being nobody, 3 years of protecting himself and Jalen from a world that had already taken so much. All of it balanced on what he said next. He thought about walking away, letting Victoria Sterling figure it out on her own, letting the engineers fumble through their diagnostic software, while the Venture 2 bled out on the hangar floor. It wasn't his problem. He was just the janitor. But he looked at the aircraft, beautiful, powerful, broken, and he felt something stir in his chest. Something he'd buried 3 years ago when he traded his flight suit for overalls. The machine needed him. The fix requires manual adjustment of the primary flow regulator while the engine is running at 70% thrust, Marcus said. That means someone has to be in the cockpit, controlling the throttle and monitoring the manual pressure gauge, while a ground crew makes the physical adjustment inside the wing cowling. The digital systems can't do it. They're designed to compensate for the fault, not correct it. Can Simon do it? Or one of the other engineers? Marcus shook his head. Holding an engine at 70% thrust during a manual repair is a precision operation. The throttle response on a G650 at that power setting is measured in fractions of a percent. Too much, and you blow the repair. too little, and the pressure drops and the fault resets. You need someone who can feel the engine, not just read the instruments. And you can do that? I've done it before. Different aircraft, same principle. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Marcus could see the calculations running behind her eyes. The risk assessment, the liability concerns, the potential for catastrophic failure weighed against the certain loss of a $200 million merger. "If I authorize this," she said slowly, "and something goes wrong, then you'll have a very expensive piece of scrap metal and a lawsuit on your hands." Marcus didn't flinch. "But if you don't authorize it, you'll definitely miss your meeting, definitely lose your merger, and probably spend the next 3 days explaining to your board why your aircraft was grounded by a fault that a janitor spotted before your engineering team." Someone in the crowd stifled a laugh. Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "Fine," she said. "Do it." "I need something first." "What?" Marcus pointed at Michael, Sarah, and the 2 other engineers who had laughed loudest at Victoria's janitor joke. "I need them to leave." "What?" Michael sputtered. "You can't—" "I can, and I am." Marcus's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "I'm not working with people who don't respect the operation. This repair requires absolute coordination between the cockpit and the ground crew. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, one person more concerned with protecting their ego than following instructions, and we lose the aircraft. Maybe worse." "This is outrageous," Sarah said. "You can't just walk in here and start giving orders." "Ms. Sterling," Marcus turned to Victoria. "Your call." Victoria looked at her engineering team. The same team she had paid millions to maintain her aircraft. The same team that had failed to diagnose a fault that a janitor had spotted while sweeping the floor. "Get out," she said. "Ma'am," Michael started. "I said get out. Wait in the break room. I'll deal with you later." The 4 engineers filed out, their faces a mixture of humiliation and barely concealed rage. Michael paused at the hangar door, turning back to glare at Marcus. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "No," Marcus agreed. "It's just beginning." The door closed behind them. Marcus turned to Simon, who had remained standing near the maintenance terminal, watching the entire exchange with something like awe. "Simon, you're my ground crew lead. I need 2 technicians, your best, not your most senior. People who can follow instructions without questions and work fast under pressure." Simon nodded rapidly. "Jenkins and Cole, both former military mechanics. They know this airframe." "Good. Get them suited up and briefed on the primary flow regulator access procedure. I want them ready in 15 minutes. Simon hesitated. "Mr. Thompson." "Marcus." "Marcus." Simon took a breath. "I owe you an apology. Your maintenance report this morning. I never even saw it. We have filters on the system that automatically deprioritize submissions from non-engineering staff. I had no idea. Save it for later." Marcus was already moving toward the cockpit ladder. "Right now, I need you focused. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Then let's get to work." Marcus climbed the ladder and stepped into the cockpit of the Venture 2. For a moment, he just stood there, taking it in. The leather seats, the glass cockpit displays, the thrust levers gleaming under the overhead lights. 3 years since he'd sat in a cockpit. 3 years since he'd felt the weight of a throttle in his hand. 3 years of pretending he was someone else, something else, just another invisible man in a world that didn't see him. But the cockpit remembered. And as Marcus lowered himself into the left seat, the pilot in command position, he felt something shift inside him. A door he'd thought was locked forever, swinging slowly open. "Dad?" Marcus turned. Jalen was standing at the bottom of the ladder, looking up at him with wide eyes. "Stay back, son. This is going to be loud." "Are you really going to fly it?" Marcus smiled. A real smile. The first one he'd allowed himself in longer than he could remember. Not fly. Just talk to it for a while. Make sure it's healthy enough to fly later. "You were a pilot. A real pilot." "I was a lot of things, Jalen. A long time ago." "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus looked at his son, 8 years old, already carrying burdens no child should have to carry. The absent mother, the cramped apartment, the father who pushed a broom while other kids' fathers flew planes and wore suits and lived in houses with backyards. "Because I wanted you to know me for who I am now," Marcus said. "Not who I used to be." "Who are you now?" Marcus considered the question. The answer that came surprised even him. "I'm your father," he said. "And right now, I'm the only one who can save these people from themselves." Jalen nodded slowly, processing. Then a small smile crept across his face. "Show them, Dad." "Yeah." Marcus turned back to the cockpit instruments. "Yeah, I will." Simon's voice crackled through the headset Marcus had pulled on. "Ground crew in position. Jenkins and Cole are at the access panel. We're ready when you are." "Copy that. Starting pre-operation checklist." Marcus's hands moved across the controls with a fluidity that surprised even him. Muscle memory taking over, bypassing the conscious mind, doing what it had been trained to do through thousands of hours of repetition. He checked the hydraulic quantity gauges, verified the emergency systems were armed, confirmed that the fire suppression equipment was standing by. "Miss Sterling," he said over the intercom, "I need you and everyone else at least 50 feet from the aircraft. If something goes wrong, the hydraulic system operates at 3,000 psi. That's enough pressure to cut through steel." Victoria's voice came back, thin and strained. "Understood. We're clear." "Simon, confirm your team is wearing full protective gear." "Confirmed. Face shields, gloves, fire-resistant suits." "Good. Stand by for engine start." Marcus rested his hand on the thrust lever, closed his eyes for just a moment, felt the familiar weight of it, the texture of the grip, the slight resistance as he began to push it forward. "Here we go," he murmured. "Talk to me, girl." He initiated the engine start sequence. The Venture 2 shuddered as the turbines began to spin, a deep thrumming vibration that Marcus felt in his bones. He watched the gauges, but more than that, he listened. Listened to the pitch of the engines, the rhythm of the systems coming online, the subtle harmonics that told him everything the computers couldn't. "Engine start confirmed," Simon reported. "Nominal parameters across the board." "Don't trust the board," Marcus said. "Trust the machine." He pushed the thrust lever forward, slowly, incrementally, watching the power setting climb. 40%. 50. 60. The vibration increased. The whistle was audible now, even over the engine noise, that high-pitched frequency that had first caught his attention hours ago. "I can hear it," Simon said, his voice tight. "That's the sound you were talking about?" "That's her telling us where it hurts. Going to 70% now. Jenkins, Cole, on my mark. You're going to make a quarter turn clockwise on the primary regulator adjustment screw. Slow and steady. No sudden movements." "Copy that," Jenkins replied. Marcus pushed the throttle forward. 65%. 67. 69. The whistle grew louder, sharper, more insistent. The aircraft was shaking now, fighting against itself, the damaged regulators struggling to maintain pressure. 70%, Marcus announced. "Mark." "Turning now," Jenkins reported. "Quarter turn clockwise. Steady. Steady." Marcus felt it before he saw it on the gauges. A subtle shift in the vibration pattern, like a knot slowly loosening. "Keep going," he said. "Another quarter turn." "Copy. Second quarter turn. Steady." The whistle began to fade. The shaking subsided. The engine note smoothed out, transitioning from a strained howl to a deep, healthy purr. "Pressure stabilizing," Simon reported, his voice rising with excitement. "We're seeing normal values across all sensors." "Hold position," Marcus ordered. "Jenkins, Cole, don't move. I'm going to push to 75% to stress test the repair." "Is that safe?" Victoria's voice cut in, sharp with concern. "We'll find out." Marcus advanced the throttle. 72%. 74. 75. The aircraft held steady. The vibrations stayed smooth. The pressure gauges remained stable. "Whistle's gone," Simon said. "I don't hear anything." "Because the metal isn't stressed anymore." Marcus allowed himself a small exhale. "Jenkins, Cole, back out slowly. Secure the access panel." "Yes, sir." Marcus held the engine at 75% for another 60 seconds, monitoring every gauge, every indicator, every subtle variation in sound and feel. The Venture 2 hummed beneath him, powerful and confident, no longer fighting against itself. "Bringing power back to idle," he announced. "Stand by for full system diagnostic." He pulled the thrust lever back slowly, feeling the engine respond with precision and grace. The aircraft seemed to sigh with relief as the power came down, settling into a contented idle. "Running diagnostic now," Simon reported. A long pause, then, "All systems green. No faults. No warnings. The hydraulic system is operating within normal parameters." Marcus closed his eyes, let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "The aircraft is airworthy," he said, "but I want a full inspection of the regulator housing before any flight. The thermal damage may have weakened the surrounding components. Replace them as a precaution." "Understood. We'll get on it immediately." Marcus shut down the engine and sat in the sudden silence of the cockpit. His hands were steady, but something inside him was shaking. The adrenaline release, the emotional weight of what he'd just done. For 3 years, he'd hidden from this. For 3 years, he'd pretended he was something less than what he was. And in 45 minutes, he'd saved a $200 million aircraft and probably several lives. He removed the headset, climbed out of the cockpit, and descended the ladder. Victoria Sterling was waiting at the bottom, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Thompson." "Miss Sterling." They stood facing each other, the CEO and the janitor, the billionaire and the invisible man, the woman who had everything, and the man who had chosen to have nothing. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said. "You already said that." "No, I said your competence was beyond dispute. That's not an apology. That's a statement of fact." She took a breath, and Marcus saw something shift in her face, the armor cracking, the human being underneath showing through. "I am sorry for what I said, for how I treated you, for using you as entertainment in front of my staff." Marcus studied her. In his experience, powerful people apologized when it was convenient and forgot when it wasn't. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Do what?" "Single me out. You had 50 people in this hangar. Why me?" Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than Marcus had heard it all day. "Because you weren't afraid of me." "What?" "Everyone in this hangar, every engineer, every technician, every assistant, they're all afraid of me. They jump when I speak. They scramble when I look at them. They perform for me like trained seals, because they know I can destroy their careers with a phone call." She paused. "But you didn't. You just kept sweeping, like I wasn't even there. I was doing my job. Exactly. You were just existing, not performing, not trying to impress me or avoid me, just being. Victoria shook her head. It bothered me.
I'm not proud of that.
But it's the truth. Your indifference felt like an insult. It wasn't indifference, Marcus said. It was focus. I had a job to do. Your opinion of me wasn't relevant to getting that job done. And that's exactly what made it worse, Victoria laughed bitterly. I'm surrounded by people who care too much about what I think, and the one person who didn't care at all turned out to be the only one who could save my aircraft. Marcus glanced across the hangar to where Jalen was still sitting, watching them. The boy raised one hand in a small wave. Marcus waved back. Your son? Victoria asked. Jalen. He's 8. He watched the whole thing. What I said to you. What I did. Yes. I'm sorry for that too. A child shouldn't have to see his father humiliated. He saw more than humiliation. Marcus turned back to Victoria. He saw his father stand up when everyone else was sitting down. He saw expertise matter more than titles. He saw that the truth eventually wins, even when it's inconvenient for the people in charge. Victoria nodded slowly. Those are good lessons. The best ones usually hurt. A commotion near the hangar entrance caught their attention. Simon was jogging toward them, his face flushed with a mixture of excitement and concern. Miss Sterling, Mr. Thompson, we've completed the preliminary inspection. The aircraft is airworthy, but... But what? Victoria demanded. Simon hesitated, glancing between them. Our backup pilots are still 6 hours out, and the charter pilots we contacted can't get here in time for your Zurich meeting. We have a functional aircraft, and no one authorized to fly it. Victoria's jaw tightened. There has to be someone. There is, Simon said quietly. Both Victoria and Simon turned to look at Marcus. No, Marcus said immediately. I'm not a commercial pilot. I haven't flown passengers in 15 years. Your ATP license is current, Simon said. Your medical is valid. You have the type rating. Legally, you're qualified. Legal and practical are two different things. Marcus, Victoria stepped closer, her voice urgent. I am asking you, not ordering, asking, to fly me to Zurich. I will pay you whatever you want. Name your price. Marcus shook his head. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? He looked at Jalen again. The boy was standing now, sketchbook forgotten on the floor, watching his father with an intensity that cut through everything else. I left this life for a reason, Marcus said quietly. I made a promise to my son, to myself. I would never put myself in a position where he might grow up without a father. You just risked your life fixing my aircraft. That's different. I was on the ground. I was in control. You'd be in control in the cockpit, too. For 10 hours, over the Atlantic, in an aircraft that just had a major hydraulic repair? Marcus shook his head. The risk profile is completely different. I can't do that to Jalen. I won't. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but something in Marcus's expression stopped her. She turned to look at the boy standing across the hangar, small, quiet, watching his father with absolute trust. I had a father like you, she said suddenly. Marcus blinked. What? He worked 3 jobs, never complained, never missed a single one of my school events, even when it meant driving 6 hours round trip after a night shift. Victoria's voice had changed, softened in a way Marcus hadn't thought possible. He died when I was 16. Heart attack. Working himself to death so I could have opportunities he never had. I'm sorry. Don't be. He gave me everything. But I always wished... She paused, composing herself. I always wished he'd taken care of himself as well as he took care of me. That he'd been a little selfish sometimes. that he'd let himself have something beyond sacrifice. Marcus didn't respond. He didn't know how. "You were great once," Victoria said. "You still are. But you've buried yourself so deep in being Jalen's father that you've forgotten you can be both. His father and yourself." "You don't know anything about me." "I know you just saved my aircraft when no one else could. I know you did it with skills you've been hiding for 3 years. And I know that somewhere inside you, there's a man who misses being in the cockpit more than he'll ever admit." Marcus felt the words land somewhere deep in his chest, in the place where he kept the memories of flight, of freedom, of being exceptional at something that mattered. He looked at Jalen one more time. The boy nodded, just once, but it was enough. "I have conditions," Marcus said. Victoria's eyes lit up. "Name them." "First, I want a co-pilot. Someone qualified on this aircraft type, even if they're legally prohibited from being pilot in command right now. I want a second set of hands in that cockpit." "Done. We'll find someone." "Second, I want a full maintenance check before departure. Not a cursory inspection. A complete systems review by technicians I trust. Simon and his team, not the engineers you just dismissed." "Done." "Third," Marcus hesitated. "Jalen comes with us." Victoria blinked. "You want to bring your son on the flight?" "If I'm going to fly again, he's going to be there when I do it. He needs to see that part of me, the part I've been hiding from him. And I need him where I can see him. Non-negotiable." Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "you have yourself a deal." The next 90 minutes moved with a controlled urgency that Marcus remembered from his military days. The organized chaos of a mission coming together under impossible time constraints. Simon mobilized his team with a precision that surprised even Victoria. Jenkins and Cole worked through the maintenance checklist, while 2 additional technicians ran parallel diagnostics on the navigation and communication systems. Every component was tested, retested, and signed off with a kind of thoroughness that left no room for doubt. Marcus stayed in the cockpit, familiarizing himself with the specific layout of the Venture 2's controls. The G650 was a generation newer than the aircraft he'd trained on, but the fundamental architecture was the same. His hands moved across the switches and panels, rebuilding the neural pathways that 3 years of dormancy had weakened, but not destroyed. "Mr. Thompson?" Marcus turned. A young woman stood at the cockpit door, maybe 30 years old, with close-cropped hair and the confident bearing of someone who had spent time in uniform. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, retired Navy. Miss Sterling's people found me through the charter pilot network. I have 1,200 hours on the G650, but I'm technically on mandatory rest for another 4 hours." She smiled slightly. "Which means I can sit in the right seat and help, but I can't legally take the controls unless you become incapacitated. You understand the situation? I understand that you're about to fly a CEO across the Atlantic in an aircraft that just had an emergency repair and that you haven't flown passengers in 15 years. Chen settled into the co-pilot seat with practiced ease. I also understand that you're the reason this aircraft is functional at all. So yes, I'm comfortable with the arrangement." Marcus studied her. "You're not nervous?" "I've landed on aircraft carriers in 40-knot crosswinds, Mr. Thompson. A transatlantic flight in a luxury jet is practically a vacation." She began running through her own checklist. "Besides, I looked up your record. Distinguished Flying Cross. Test pilot school. 3 emergency landings with 0 casualties." She glanced at him. "If I had to pick someone to fly with on short notice, I could do a lot worse." "You could do a lot better, too. Someone who's actually current." "Current is overrated. Instinct isn't something you lose." Chen finished her checklist and turned to face him fully. The question is whether you trust yourself. Because if you don't, we shouldn't do this. Marcus was quiet for a moment. It was a fair question, maybe the only question that mattered. Did he trust himself? 3 years ago, the answer would have been automatic, absolute. He had trusted himself with machines worth hundreds of millions of dollars, with missions that carried national security implications, with the lives of crew members who depended on his judgment in situations where a wrong decision meant death. But that was before the divorce. Before he'd watched Denise walk out the door and realized that his confidence in the cockpit hadn't translated to confidence in his own home. Before he'd looked at Jalen, 4 years old at the time, too young to understand why Mommy wasn't coming back, and realized that all his medals and commendations meant nothing if he couldn't keep his family together. He'd lost faith in himself that day, not as a pilot, but as a man, and somewhere in the process of rebuilding, he'd convinced himself that the two were the same thing. "Dad?" Marcus turned. Jalen was climbing the stairs to the cockpit, his eyes wide with wonder. "Hey, buddy, you ready for this?" "Are we really going to fly? Like, in the air?" "That's generally how it works, yes." Jalen moved slowly into the cockpit, taking in every detail with the intensity of a boy who had spent years drawing aircraft without ever being inside one. His hand reached out to touch the throttle lever, then pulled back like he'd touched something sacred. "It's okay," Marcus said. "You can touch it." Jalen's fingers brushed the throttle. "This makes it go?" "This controls how much power the engines produce. Push it forward, more power. Pull it back, less power." "And you know how to use all of this?" Marcus looked at the instrument panel. Dozens of switches, buttons, displays, and indicators that would look like incomprehensible chaos to anyone without training. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know how to use all of this." "Then why did you stop?" The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. He looked at his son, 8 years old, asking the question that Marcus had avoided asking himself for 3 years. "Because I was scared," Marcus admitted. "Of crashing?" "No, of not being there for you. Of being so focused on flying that I forgot how to be your dad." He reached out and put his hand on Jalen's shoulder. "Your mom and we had problems. A lot of them were my fault. I was gone too much. I cared about the mission more than I cared about being home. And when she left, I promised myself I would never make that mistake again." "So you became a janitor?" "I became available, present. I wanted to be the dad who picked you up from school every day, who helped with homework every night, who was there when you needed me. And the only way I knew how to do that was to stop being everything else." Jalen was quiet for a moment, processing this with the seriousness of a child confronting adult truths for the first time. "But you're still you," Jalen said finally. "You're still the person who knows how to fly. Stopping didn't change that." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. His 8-year-old son had just articulated something he'd been unable to see for 3 years. "No," Marcus said softly. "I guess it didn't." "So maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe you can be my dad and the person who flies." Marcus pulled Jalen into a hug, holding him tight. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned from watching you." Chen, who had been politely pretending not to listen, cleared her throat. "We should probably start pre-flight. Miss Sterling is getting anxious." Marcus released Jalen and straightened in his seat. "Right. Jalen, I need you to go sit in the cabin. There's a seat right behind the cockpit door. That's where you'll be for takeoff. Put on your seatbelt and don't take it off until I tell you, okay?" "Okay, Dad." "And Jalen?" The boy paused at the cockpit door. "I love you. Whatever happens today, I need you to know that." Jalen smiled. I know, Dad. I love you too. He disappeared into the cabin, and Marcus turned back to the instrument panel. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. For the first time in 3 years, he felt ready. Let's do this, he said. Chen nodded. Initiating pre-flight checklist. Fuel quantity? Checked. 23,000 pounds, sufficient for destination plus reserves. Flight controls? Free and correct. Navigation systems? Online and programmed. Direct routing to Zurich, with alternates at Shannon and Paris Charles de Gaulle. They moved through the checklist with professional precision, each item confirmed and double-checked. By the time they finished, Victoria Sterling had boarded and taken her seat in the main cabin, her assistant settling in across from her with a laptop already open. Mr. Thompson, Victoria's voice came through the cabin intercom. Are we ready? Marcus keyed the microphone. Ready for engine start, Miss Sterling. Flight time to Zurich is approximately 8 hours and 40 minutes. We'll be cruising at 41,000 feet. Weather looks good across the Atlantic, but we may encounter some turbulence over the mid-ocean. Nothing serious. Understood. Get me there in one piece, and there's a substantial bonus waiting for you on the other end. I'll get you there in one piece because that's my job, not because of a bonus. A pause. Then, fair enough. Proceed when ready. Marcus switched to ground control frequency. Sterling Ground, Venture 2 requesting engine start and taxi clearance. Venture 2, Sterling Ground. Engine start approved. Taxi to runway 27 via taxiway Alpha. Hold short of runway. Engine start approved. Taxi to runway 27 via Alpha. Hold short, Venture 2. Marcus reached for the engine start switches. His hand hovered for just a moment, one last chance to back out, to admit he wasn't ready, to return to the safety of invisibility. Then he thought of Jalen's words. Maybe you don't have to choose. He engaged the starters. The engines came to life with a familiar roar, turbines spinning up to idle, the aircraft trembling slightly as 40,000 pounds of thrust awakened beneath them. Marcus felt the vibration through his seat, through his hands on the controls, through every nerve ending that remembered what this felt like. Engine start complete, Chen reported. All parameters normal. Copy. Releasing brakes. The Venture 2 began to roll, responding to Marcus's commands with the smooth precision of a machine that had been properly healed. He guided it along the taxiway, feeling the weight and balance of the aircraft, relearning its personality after years apart. You've got a nice touch, Chen observed. She's a good aircraft, responsive, well-maintained. Marcus paused. Now, anyway. They reached the hold short line for runway 27. Marcus stopped the aircraft and completed the before takeoff checklist, verifying every system one final time. Sterling Tower, Venture 2 holding short of runway 27, ready for departure. Venture 2, Sterling Tower, winds 270 at 12 knots, cleared for takeoff runway 27. Contact departure on 124.9er, airborne. Cleared for takeoff 27, departure on 124.9er. Venture 2. Marcus advanced the thrust levers slightly, bringing the aircraft onto the runway. The Venture 2 aligned perfectly with the center line, pointed toward the horizon like an arrow waiting to be released. He took a deep breath, looked at Chen. She nodded. Here we go. Marcus pushed the thrust levers forward to takeoff power. The engines responded with a surge of acceleration that pushed him back into his seat, the runway rushing past in an accelerating blur. 80 knots, Chen called out. Check. V1. No going back now. They were committed. Rotate. Marcus pulled back on the control column. The nose lifted. The main wheels left the ground, and suddenly they were airborne, climbing into the morning sky, leaving behind everything that had happened on the ground. "Positive rate of climb," Chen reported. "Gear up." The landing gear retracted with a solid thunk. Marcus held the climb attitude steady, watching the altitude wind up through 1,000 feet. 2,000. 5,000. "Sterling departure. Venture 2 is with you, climbing to flight level 410. Venture 2, Sterling departure. Radar contact. Proceed direct merit intersection, then as filed. Climb and maintain flight level 410. Direct merit. Climb and maintain 410. Venture 2. Marcus engaged the autopilot and allowed himself a moment to breathe. They were in the air. The aircraft was performing flawlessly. Everything he'd feared, the rust, the doubt, the possibility that he'd lost whatever made him good at this, had proven unfounded. He was still a pilot. He had always been a pilot. He had just forgotten for a while. "Nice work," Chen said. "Textbook departure." "Thanks, but we've got 8 hours to go. Stay sharp." Always, as they climbed through the thin air toward cruising altitude, Marcus felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 3 years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy at being exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was born to do. He glanced back through the cockpit door. Jalen was staring out the cabin window, his face pressed against the glass, watching the world fall away below them. The boy caught his father's eye and grinned. Marcus grinned back. For the first time in a very long time, everything felt right. The first 3 hours of the flight passed without incident. Marcus and Chen fell into an easy rhythm, trading monitoring duties, discussing weather updates, reviewing the approach procedures for Zurich. The autopilot handled the actual flying, but Marcus found himself making small manual adjustments anyway, correcting for wind drift, optimizing the flight path, doing the things that separated adequate pilots from exceptional ones. Victoria worked steadily in the cabin, her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard as she prepared for the merger meeting. Occasionally, she would look up and glance toward the cockpit, her expression unreadable. "She's watching you," Chen observed during one of these moments. "I know." "Trying to figure you out, probably. You don't fit into any of her categories." "What do you mean?" People like Victoria Sterling see the world in terms of value and utility. Everyone has a function, a price, a place in the hierarchy. You were a janitor, bottom of the hierarchy, minimal value, easily replaceable. Then you turned out to be something else entirely, and now she doesn't know where to put you. "I'm not trying to be anywhere. I just want to fly this aircraft, get her to her meeting, and go home to my son." That's exactly what I mean. You don't want anything from her. That makes you impossible to control, which makes you dangerous. Marcus shook his head. "I'm not dangerous to anyone. You're dangerous to her worldview, to the idea that money can buy everything and everyone." Chen smiled. "That's a kind of power, you know. The power of not needing anything." Before Marcus could respond, a soft chime sounded from the instrument panel. He looked down at the engine displays and felt his stomach drop. "What is it?" Chen asked, instantly alert. "Secondary hydraulic pressure. It's fluctuating." Chen leaned forward to check the gauge. "It's within limits. Barely. Could be a sensor issue." "Could be. Or could be the thermal damage extended further than we thought." Marcus's mind was already racing through possibilities, calculating risks, formulating contingencies. "We're 3 hours from any suitable divert airport. If the secondary system fails..." "We still have primary. The aircraft can fly on one hydraulic system." "Yes, but it limits our options. No spoilers, reduced brake effectiveness, potential issues with the landing gear." "So what do we do?" Marcus watched the gauge. The fluctuation continued, small but persistent, like a heartbeat that was slightly irregular. "We monitor it," he said finally. "If it gets worse, we divert. But we don't panic. The system is telling us something, and our job is to listen." "You sound like you've done this before." "More times than I want to remember." The next hour was tense. Marcus divided his attention between the horizon and the hydraulic gauge, watching for any sign of deterioration. Chen handled communications and navigation, freeing Marcus to focus on the developing situation. The fluctuation stabilized at a level that was concerning, but not critical. Whatever was causing it had reached a steady state, not getting better, but not getting worse either. "We should tell Miss Sterling," Chen said finally. "Tell her what? That we have a gauge acting funny? That we have a potential issue that might require a divert. She deserves to know." Marcus hesitated. Chen was right. Passengers had a right to information, especially when that information affected their safety. But he also knew that telling Victoria would create pressure, expectations, demands for immediate action that might not be the right response. "I'll handle it," he said. He unbuckled from his seat and moved into the cabin. Victoria looked up from her laptop, her expression sharpening as she registered his presence. "Problem?" she asked. "Potentially. We're seeing some fluctuation in the secondary hydraulic system. It's stable for now, but if it deteriorates, we may need to divert to an alternate airport." "Which airport?" "Shannon, Ireland is the closest suitable option, about 90 minutes from our current position." "And if we continue to Zurich?" "If the situation stays stable, we land normally with reduced safety margins. If it gets worse, we have fewer options." Victoria closed her laptop slowly. "What's your recommendation?" "Monitor the situation. Make a decision in 30 minutes based on how the system is behaving." "Not divert immediately?" "Not yet. The fluctuation could stabilize, could resolve on its own, or could be a sensor fault rather than an actual system issue. Diverting now means you definitely miss your meeting. Continuing means you probably make it, with a small risk of delay." "Probably isn't definitely." "Nothing in aviation is definite, Miss Sterling. We manage risk. We don't eliminate it." Victoria studied him for a long moment. "You're asking me to trust your judgment." "I'm asking you to let me do my job. You hired me because I know what I'm doing. Let me prove that wasn't a mistake." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Respect, maybe, or at least acknowledgement. 30 minutes, she said. "Then I want an update, whatever the situation." "You'll have it." Marcus returned to the cockpit. Chen raised an eyebrow. "How'd she take it?" "Better than expected. She's tougher than she looks. Most successful people are. You don't build empires by falling apart at the first sign of trouble." Marcus settled back into his seat, his eyes returning to the hydraulic gauge. The fluctuation continued its irregular dance, but true to form, it didn't worsen. 25 minutes later, he noticed something. The fluctuation was decreasing. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but definitely improving. "Chen, look at this." She leaned over. "It's stabilizing. The oscillation amplitude is dropping." "Whatever was causing the problem is resolving. The system is healing itself." "Self-healing hydraulics? That's not a thing." "No, but thermal expansion is. The repair we did, the adjustment to the regulator, it's settling. The components are reaching equilibrium at cruise temperature." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "She's going to be fine." By the time the 30-minute mark arrived, the secondary hydraulic system was operating within normal parameters. The fluctuation had disappeared entirely, replaced by steady, reliable pressure readings. Marcus keyed the cabin intercom. "Ms. Sterling, this is the captain. The hydraulic situation has resolved. We're continuing to Zurich as planned. Current estimate for arrival is 2 hours and 15 minutes. Victoria's voice came back, and for the first time all day, it contained something that sounded almost like warmth. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for everything." "Just doing my job, ma'am." He switched off the intercom and looked at Chen. "You know," she said, "most pilots would have diverted at the first sign of trouble, covered themselves, blamed it on safety regulations." "I'm not most pilots." "No, you're definitely not." Chen shook her head. "I don't know why you spent 3 years pushing a broom, but I hope you're done with that now. The world needs pilots like you, not janitors." Marcus didn't respond. He just looked out the windscreen at the Atlantic Ocean stretching below them, blue and endless and full of possibilities. Maybe Chen was right. Maybe Jalen was right too. Maybe he didn't have to choose after all. The European coast materialized through the haze like a promise kept. Marcus watched the Irish shoreline pass beneath them, then the green patchwork of England, then the orderly geometry of France. 8 hours in the air, and the world had transformed from the familiar landscape of his carefully constructed anonymity into something new and uncertain. "Beginning descent checklist," Chen announced. "Zurich approach in 40 minutes. Marcus nodded, pulling his attention back to the task at hand. The philosophical questions could wait. Right now, he had an aircraft to land. "Jalen," he called over his shoulder. "You doing okay back there?" His son's face appeared in the cockpit doorway, lit up with a kind of wonder that only children can sustain for 8 consecutive hours. "Dad, we flew over the ocean. The actual ocean. I could see ships down there, tiny, like toys." "Pretty amazing, isn't it?" "Is this what you used to do? Every day?" "Not exactly like this. The jets I flew were smaller, faster, and a lot less comfortable." Marcus smiled. "But yeah, this was my life. I wish I'd known. I would have thought it was so cool." "You think I'm cool now?" Jalen considered this with exaggerated seriousness. "Cooler than Tommy Bradshaw's dad. He just flies regular planes. You fixed this one and flew it." Chen laughed softly. "Kid's got a point. Go sit down, buddy. We're going to start descending soon, and I need you buckled in." "Okay, Dad." Jalen paused. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Thanks for bringing me. This is the best day of my life." The words hit Marcus somewhere deep, in the place where he kept all the guilt about the things he'd denied his son, the truth about who he was, the experiences they could have shared, the parts of himself he'd hidden out of fear. "Mine too, Jalen. Mine too." The boy disappeared back into the cabin, and Marcus turned to find Chen watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just thinking that some people spend their whole careers chasing recognition, awards, promotions, and the best day of your life is flying your son across the Atlantic in borrowed clothes." "These aren't borrowed, they're mine. You know what I mean." Marcus checked the descent profile on the navigation display. "The things that matter aren't complicated, Chen. People make them complicated because they're afraid of how simple the truth really is." "And what's the truth?" "That at the end of the day, none of the rest of it matters. The titles, the money, the corner office. What matters is whether the people you love know you love them, and whether you're there when they need you." Spoken like a man who's figured something out. Spoken like a man who wasted 3 years learning what he already knew. Marcus began the descent checklist. "Let's get this aircraft on the ground." The approach into Zurich was textbook. Marcus guided the Venture 2 through Swiss airspace with the precision of a surgeon, responding to air traffic control instructions, configuring the aircraft for landing, managing speed and altitude with the kind of intuitive skill that couldn't be taught, only earned through thousands of hours of practice. Venture 2, Zurich approach. Descend and maintain 5,000 feet. Expect vectors for ILS runway 28. Down to 5,000. Expect ILS 28, Venture 2. Chen handled the radio calls while Marcus flew, their coordination seamless despite having met only hours ago. There was something about the cockpit that stripped away pretense and hierarchy, reducing everything to competence and trust. "Landing gear," Marcus called. "Down and locked, 3 green. Flaps. Full flaps indicating. Airspeed. 140 knots, on profile." The runway materialized ahead of them, a gray ribbon cutting through the Swiss landscape. Marcus had landed on carriers, pitching in heavy seas, on desert airstrips with crosswinds that could flip a lighter aircraft, on runways so short that every inch of stopping distance mattered. This was easy by comparison. The main wheels touched with a gentle chirp. The nose wheel followed a moment later. Marcus deployed the thrust reversers and felt the aircraft decelerate smoothly. The accumulated momentum of 8 hours and 4,000 miles bleeding away into the Swiss concrete. Venture 2, exit runway 28 at taxiway Charlie. Contact ground on 121.9er. Exit Charlie, ground on 121.9er, Venture 2. Marcus guided the aircraft off the runway and onto the taxiway. The tension that had been building since takeoff finally began to release, replaced by a quiet satisfaction that he hadn't felt in years. He had done it. 8 hours across the Atlantic, a hydraulic scare, and a 3-year gap in his flying career, and he had delivered the aircraft and its passengers safely to their destination. "Nice landing," Chen said. "Thanks. Nice co-piloting. We make a good team." "We do." They taxied to the executive terminal, where a Mercedes sedan and a cluster of people in expensive suits were already waiting. Victoria's merger meeting, the entire reason for this impossible day, was about to begin. Marcus brought the aircraft to a stop and began the shutdown checklist. As the engines wound down to silence, Victoria appeared in the cockpit doorway. "Mr. Thompson." Marcus turned. Victoria looked different than she had that morning. Still polished, still powerful, but with something new in her eyes. Something that might have been respect. "Miss Sterling, we've arrived with 20 minutes to spare. Your meeting awaits." "Thank you. For everything." She hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. "I meant what I said earlier, about wanting you on my team. And I meant what I said about not wanting an executive function. I know, I'm not offering one." Victoria glanced at Chen, then back at Marcus. "I'm offering you a choice. Whatever you want to do with your skills, flying, consulting, training, whatever. I want to make it possible. No strings attached, no obligations, just an opportunity, whenever you're ready to take it." Marcus studied her. He had spent the morning being humiliated by this woman, and now she was offering him a future. The irony was not lost on him. "Why?" he asked. "Because I was wrong about you. Because I judged you by your clothes instead of your capabilities. Because I almost let my arrogance cost lives, and you saved them anyway." Victoria's voice softened. "And because I had a father who deserved better than he got, and I see him in you." Marcus didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Victoria Sterling who had mocked him in front of 50 people. This was someone else. Someone who had learned something, maybe even changed something. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I ask." Victoria extended her hand. "Thank you, Captain Thompson, for the flight, and for the lesson." Marcus shook her hand. "Good luck with your merger." "With what happened today? I don't think I need luck anymore. I think I need better judgment." She smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "I'll be in touch." She turned and walked down the aircraft stairs, where her assistant was waiting with a tablet full of last-minute briefings. The Mercedes pulled away moments later, carrying Victoria Sterling toward the meeting that would determine the future of her company. Marcus watched the car disappear, then turned back to find Jalen standing behind him, eyes wide. "Dad, did she just offer you a job?" "Something like that." "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know yet. What do you think I should do?" Jalen considered the question with his usual seriousness. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy. You've been sad for a long time, even though you pretend you're not. I can tell." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. 8 years old, and his son had seen through every wall he'd built. "I'm not sad, Jalen. I'm just tired." "That's what sad people say." Chen, who had been running through the post-flight checklist, laughed out loud. "The kid's got you there, Thompson." Marcus shook his head. "When did you get so wise?" "I watch and learn. That's what you always tell me to do." "Well, maybe you're watching and learning a little too well." They finished the post-flight procedures and disembarked from the aircraft. A representative from the Zurich fixed base operator met them on the tarmac, offering refreshments and a place to rest while they waited for further instructions. Marcus declined. Instead, he took Jalen's hand and walked to the edge of the ramp, looking out at the Swiss Alps rising in the distance. "Pretty, isn't it?" he said. "It's beautiful. I never thought I'd see mountains like this." "Life's full of surprises, buddy. Sometimes the best ones come on the worst days." They stood there in silence for a while, father and son, taking in a view that neither of them had expected to see when they'd woken up in their cramped apartment that morning. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text message from Simon, back at the airfield in the States. Michael and Sarah have been terminated. Formal complaints lodged against them for safety protocol violations. Victoria's orders. She also told me to tell you that the entire engineering team sends their thanks. You saved more than an aircraft today. You saved careers. Marcus read the message twice, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Everything okay?" Jalen asked. "Better than okay."
Sometimes the good guys win. You're a good guy, Dad.
"I try to be."
No.
Jalen looked up at him with an intensity that seemed far beyond his years. "You are. Even when you were a janitor, you were a good guy. The job doesn't make the person. The person makes the person." Marcus felt his eyes sting. He blinked rapidly, blaming it on the mountain air. "Where did you hear that?" "You told me, a long time ago. You said that Grandpa was a janitor too, and he was the best man you ever knew." Marcus had forgotten saying that. It was true. His father had cleaned offices for 30 years and had died with more dignity and integrity than most CEOs Marcus had encountered. "Your grandpa would have loved today," Marcus said quietly. "He can see it. Mom says people who die can still see us from heaven." The mention of Denise sent a complicated wave of emotions through Marcus. He hadn't spoken to his ex-wife in over a year, and Jalen rarely mentioned her.
When did your mom tell you that?
"Last month. She called on my birthday, remember?" Marcus remembered. A 5-minute phone call from somewhere in California, promises to visit that would never be kept, and Jalen putting on a brave face, even though his heart was clearly breaking. "Yeah, I remember. She asked about you. I told her you were doing good, that you were happy." "You told her I was happy?" "I didn't want her to feel bad," Jalen shrugged. "And anyway, I thought maybe if I said it, it would become true, like a wish." Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with his son. "Jalen, I need you to understand something. The reason I've been the way I've been, it's not because of you. It's never been because of you. You're the only thing that's kept me going these past 3 years." "I know, Dad." "Do you?" "Yeah, you gave up everything for me. You could have been a pilot this whole time, but you didn't want to leave me. That's why you took the janitor job." Jalen's voice was steady, matter of fact. "I'm not a little kid anymore. I figure things out." "When did you figure this out?" "A while ago. I found your medals in the closet, the ones in the box, and your license thing in the drawer. Jalen paused. I didn't tell you because I thought you wanted it to be a secret. And I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would tell me when you were ready. Marcus didn't know whether to laugh or cry. His son had known for who knows how long, and had kept the secret to protect his father's feelings. I should have told you, Marcus said. I should have told you everything from the beginning. It's okay, Dad. I understand why you didn't. Why do you think I didn't? Jalen considered this. Because you were ashamed. Not of being a janitor, of giving up. You were ashamed that you quit something you were good at, even if you quit for a good reason. Marcus stared at his son, 8 years old. 8 years old, and he had seen more clearly into Marcus's soul than Marcus had seen himself. You're remarkable, Marcus said. You know that? I learned from watching you. I think you learned in spite of me. Maybe both, Jalen grinned. Can we get food? I'm starving. They only had weird airplane snacks. Marcus laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere genuine. Yeah, buddy, let's get you some food. They walked back toward the terminal, where Chen was waiting with news. Victoria's assistant called. The merger meeting is going well, better than expected. She wants to know if we can be ready for a return flight in 4 hours. 4 hours? Marcus frowned. That's quick. Apparently, she's so confident about the deal closing that she wants to be back in the States for a press conference tomorrow morning. Chen shrugged. Rich people keep different schedules. Can we be ready? Aircraft's been refueled and inspected. No issues. The Swiss mechanics are thorough. They found nothing wrong with the hydraulic system. Your repair held perfectly. Marcus nodded slowly. 4 hours. Enough time to feed Jalen, rest a bit, and prepare for another 8-hour flight. Tell her we'll be ready. You sure? You've been flying all day. Another 8 hours is a lot. I'll manage. I've done worse. Chen studied him. You're different than you were this morning. More, I don't know, more present, more alive. I feel different. Today changed something. Marcus looked at Jalen, who was examining a Swiss chocolate bar from a vending machine with intense fascination. I spent 3 years hiding from who I was. I thought I was protecting my son, but really I was protecting myself. From failure, from risk, from the possibility of losing more than I'd already lost. And now? Now I realized that hiding was the bigger failure. You can't protect the people you love by becoming someone you're not. Eventually, the truth comes out, and then you have to deal with both the truth and the lie. Chen nodded slowly. So what happens when we get back? I don't know exactly, but I know I'm not going back to pushing a broom. Victoria's offer? Maybe. Maybe something else. The point is, I have options now. Options I didn't have this morning. You always had options, Thompson. You just couldn't see them. Yeah, Marcus smiled. I'm starting to figure that out. They found a restaurant in the terminal that served proper meals. Not the gourmet fare that Victoria Sterling was probably enjoying at her merger meeting, but solid, satisfying food that Jalen attacked with the enthusiasm of a boy who had been living on airplane snacks for 8 hours. Marcus watched his son eat, thinking about everything that had happened since that alarm clock had buzzed at 4:47 a.m. Less than 12 hours ago, he had been nobody, the invisible man, the janitor who swept floors and emptied trash cans, while wealthy executives looked through him like he didn't exist. Now he was sitting in Switzerland, eating schnitzel with his son, waiting to fly a $200 million jet back across the Atlantic for a woman who would apologize for humiliating him and offered him any future he wanted. Life was strange. Life was unpredictable. Life was capable of turning on a single moment. A whistle in an aircraft's fuselage, a pointed finger, a choice to speak up instead of staying silent. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "What happens when we get home?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, is everything going to go back to normal? The apartment, the school, Jalen hesitated. "The job?" "Some things will stay the same. The apartment, your school, the important stuff. But other things might change. I might start flying again. Not all the time, not like before, but sometimes, when it makes sense." "Would I still see you every day?" "That's non-negotiable, buddy. Whatever I do, wherever I go, you come first. Always. That's the one thing that's never going to change." Jalen nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Okay, that's what I wanted to know." "You're really okay with this? With everything that happened today?" "Dad." Jalen set down his fork and looked at Marcus with an expression of exasperated patience that was pure 8-year-old wisdom. "Today was the best day of my life. I got to fly across the ocean. I got to see you be amazing. I got to eat Swiss chocolate. Why would I not be okay with this?" "Because everything's changing. Change is scary. Change is only scary when it's bad change. This is good change." Jalen picked up his fork again. "Besides, you're still you. You're still my dad. That's all that matters." Marcus reached across the table and ruffled his son's hair. "When did you become the grown-up in this relationship?" "Probably when you forgot how to be one." Chen, who had been quietly eating her own meal, nearly choked on her coffee. "Kids got jokes." "Kids got too many jokes," Marcus said. "I blame television." "You don't let me watch television." "Then I blame your school." "My school is fine. I blame you." "How is this my fault?" "You're the one who taught me to speak up and tell the truth." Jalen grinned. "Can't blame me for doing what you taught me." Marcus shook his head, but he was smiling. Whatever happened next, whatever the future held, he had this moment. His son. This table. This strange, wonderful day that had started with humiliation and was ending with something that felt remarkably like hope. "Finish your food," Marcus said. "We've got a long flight ahead of us." "Are you going to sleep at all?" "I'll rest a bit before we take off. Chen will handle the first couple hours of the return flight." "But you'll still be flying, right? Like, you'll be in the pilot seat?" "Co-pilot seat for the first part, then we'll switch." Jalen nodded, satisfied. "Good. I want to watch you fly again. From the cockpit this time, if that's allowed." Marcus looked at Chen, who shrugged. "Your aircraft, your call." "We'll see," Marcus said. "Depends on how smooth the flight is." "It'll be smooth. You're the best pilot in the world." "That's a bit of an exaggeration." "No, it isn't. You flew a broken plane across the ocean and landed it perfectly. That makes you the best pilot in the world." Jalen's voice carried the absolute certainty of childhood conviction. "At least, you're the best pilot in my world, and that's the one that counts." Marcus didn't trust himself to respond. He just reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. Some things didn't need words. The return flight departed Zurich at 6:47 p.m. local time. The Venture 2, climbing into a sky painted orange and gold by the setting European sun. Victoria Sterling sat in the main cabin, her laptop closed for the first time all day, a glass of champagne untouched on the table beside her. The merger had closed. $200 million in combined assets, a new market position that would reshape her industry, and a victory that should have felt like the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Instead, she found herself watching the cockpit door, thinking about the man on the other side of it. Marcus Thompson flew the first 4 hours while Chen rested in the jump seat. Jalen, true to his request, sat in the cockpit observer seat, watching his father work with the kind of reverent attention usually reserved for church services and championship games. "Dad, what does that one do?" "That's the vertical speed indicator. It tells me how fast we're climbing or descending."
And that one? Heading indicator. Shows which direction we're pointed. What about the one with all the numbers? Flight management computer. It's basically the aircraft's brain. Calculates our route, fuel burn, time to destination.
Jalen absorbed each answer with serious concentration, filing away the information like precious cargo. Marcus found himself explaining things he hadn't thought about in years, rediscovering his own knowledge through his son's curiosity. "You really know everything about this, don't you?" Jalen said. "Not everything. Nobody knows everything. But I know enough to keep us safe and get us where we're going." "Is that what being good at something means? Knowing enough?" Marcus considered the question. Being good at something means understanding that you'll never know everything, but committing to learn as much as you can anyway. It means respecting the craft, respecting the risks, and never getting so confident that you stop paying attention.
Is that why you stopped? Because you got too confident? No. I stopped because I got scared of something that had nothing to do with flying. Marcus adjusted the autopilot slightly, trimming for a small change in wind conditions. "I was good at flying. I was bad at being a husband and father. When your mom left, I thought the solution was to stop being the thing I was good at, so I could become better at the thing I was bad at." "Did it work?" "I became a better father. I'm with you every day, and that matters. But I didn't become a better person. I just became a smaller one. I cut off part of who I was, and that part has been missing ever since. Until today." "Until today." Marcus smiled at his son. "You know what I realized flying across the ocean this morning?" "What?" "That being your father and being a pilot aren't two different things. They're both part of the same person. And that person is better, more complete, more alive when all the parts are working together." Jalen nodded slowly, processing this. "So, you're going to fly again? For real?"
"I think so. Not the way I did before. No more test flights, no more military missions, no more disappearing for weeks at a time. But yes, I'm going to fly again."
"Good," Jalen grinned, "because this is way cooler than watching you push a broom."
Marcus laughed. "Yeah, I suppose it is." They flew in comfortable silence for a while, the Atlantic Ocean invisible beneath the darkness that had swallowed the world below. Somewhere behind them, Europe slept. Somewhere ahead, America waited.
"Dad?"
"Yeah?"
"I'm proud of you."
The words landed in Marcus's chest with unexpected force. He had spent 3 years trying to be someone his son could be proud of. The reliable father, the steady presence, the man who showed up every day, regardless of circumstances. And all that time, he had been hiding the very thing that might have inspired the deepest pride. "I'm proud of you too, Jalen. More than you know."
"For what? I didn't do anything today except sit around and watch."
"You did more than that. You believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. You told me to show them." Marcus reached over and ruffled his son's hair. "Sometimes the most important thing isn't what someone does. It's knowing that someone's in your corner, no matter what."
"I'll always be in your corner, Dad."
"I know. That's what makes you remarkable." Chen stirred in the jump seat, checking her watch. "Thompson, you've been flying for 4 hours. My turn to take the controls." "You sure? I'm not tired." "Liar, your blink rate's increased and you keep shifting in your seat. Classic fatigue indicators." Chen unbuckled and moved toward the captain's seat. "Switch out. That's an order." "You can't give me orders. You're not even legally pilot in command." "I'm giving you advice from someone who's been watching you fight sleep for the last 30 minutes.
Take it or don't. But if you don't, I'm telling Victoria you're compromised, and she'll ground you herself."
Marcus hesitated, then nodded. Chen was right. He was more tired than he wanted to admit. The adrenaline that had carried him through the crisis had faded, leaving behind the accumulated exhaustion of a day that had started at 4:47 a.m. and showed no signs of ending. "Fine, you have the aircraft." "I have the aircraft." Chen settled into the captain's seat, her hands moving over the controls with practiced confidence. "Go rest. I'll wake you when we're 2 hours out." Marcus moved to the jump seat, adjusting it into a reclined position. Jalen remained in the observer seat, but his eyes were getting heavy too. "Come here, buddy." Marcus patted the space beside him. "There's room for both of us." Jalen squeezed into the jump seat next to his father, curling against Marcus's side the way he had when he was much younger. Within minutes, the boy was asleep, his breathing slow and steady. Marcus watched his son sleep and thought about everything that had changed in the past 20 hours. He had started the day invisible. He would end it transformed. Not because he had proven anything to Victoria Sterling or her engineers. Not because he had saved a $200 million aircraft or an even more expensive merger deal. Because he had finally stopped hiding from himself. He closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Chen woke him 2 hours later, as promised. "Approaching the coast. Thought you'd want to be in the seat for the landing." Marcus stretched, careful not to wake Jalen, who was still curled against him. The boy stirred slightly, then settled back into sleep. "How's the aircraft?" "Perfect. No issues. She's flying like a dream," Chen smiled. "Whatever you did to that hydraulic system, it worked." "The credit goes to the machine. I just listened to what she was trying to tell us." Marcus gently extricated himself from Jalen and moved back to the captain's seat. The American coastline was visible on the navigation display, a familiar shape that meant home. "Sterling approach, Venture 2 with you, descending through flight level 250. Venture 2, Sterling approach, radar contact. Proceed direct Risto intersection. Expect vectors for ILS runway 27. Current weather is clear. Winds 260 at 8 knots. Direct Risto. Expect ILS 27. Venture 2. The descent and approach went smoothly. Marcus flew with a precision that felt different from the morning's departure. Not desperate or reactive, but calm and confident. The natural expression of skills that had never really left him. "Here down," he called. "Down and locked, 3 green. Flaps. Full flaps, indicating." The runway lights stretched out ahead of them, beckoning them home. Marcus guided the Venture 2 down the glide slope, making minor adjustments for wind, keeping the approach path perfectly centered. The wheels touched with barely a whisper, the smoothest landing he had made in years. Maybe ever. "Nice," Chen said. "Thanks." They taxied to the executive terminal, where a small crowd had gathered despite the late hour. Simon stood at the front, flanked by Jenkins and Cole, and a dozen other technicians who had watched the drama unfold that morning. Marcus shut down the engines and completed the final checklists. When he looked up, Victoria Sterling was standing in the cockpit doorway. "We made it," she said. "We did." "I knew we would. From the moment you took those controls this morning, I knew." Victoria paused. "I've made a lot of decisions in my career, Thompson. Good ones, bad ones. Some I regret and some I'm proud of. Hiring you was supposed to be one of the bad ones. Another janitor, another invisible worker, another person I'd never think twice about. And now? Now it's the best decision I ever made. Even if I didn't actually make it," she smiled. "You made it. You decided to speak up when everyone else was too afraid or too blind. You decided to save my aircraft and my company when you had every reason to let us fail. I didn't do it for you. I know. You did it because it was the right thing to do. Because the machine needed you. Because somewhere inside that janitor's uniform, there was still a pilot who couldn't let an aircraft die. Victoria extended her hand. That's why I want you on my team. Not because you owe me anything, because people like you are rare. And I've spent my whole career surrounding myself with people who tell me what I want to hear instead of what I need to know. Marcus shook her hand. I'm still not taking an executive position. I know. I'm not offering one.
Victoria reached into her jacket and pulled out an envelope. This is a contract for an advisory role, flight safety consultant. You report to Simon, not to me. Your schedule is yours to set. Your only obligation is to do what you did today. Listen to the machines, catch the problems that computers miss, and tell the truth even when it's inconvenient.
Marcus took the envelope, but didn't open it. And if I need to leave for my son's school event?
Then you leave. No questions, no penalties, no judgment. Your family comes first. That's not just a policy. It's a core value. I learned that from you.
You learned that from watching me refuse to abandon my son.
I learned that from watching you prioritize what matters over what pays. That's a lesson most CEOs never learn.
Victoria glanced at Jalen, still asleep in the jump seat.
He's lucky to have you.
I'm lucky to have him.
You're both lucky.
Victoria turned to leave, then paused.
One more thing. The press conference tomorrow morning. The one announcing the merger. I'd like you to be there.
Why?
Because the story of how this day came together. The janitor who saved the aircraft. The invisible man who turned out to be extraordinary. That's a story worth telling. Not for my benefit, but for everyone out there who's been made to feel small by people who should know better.
Marcus considered this. I'm not interested in being a symbol.
Then don't be a symbol. Be yourself. That's more powerful anyway.
She left without waiting for an answer, making her way down the aircraft stairs to meet the crowd of executives and assistants waiting on the tarmac. Chen started gathering her things. Well, Thompson, hell of a day.
Yeah, it was.
You going to take her offer? The advisory position?
Probably.
It's a good fit. Useful work, flexible hours, chance to keep my skills sharp without disappearing into a cockpit for weeks at a time.
And the press conference?
Marcus looked at his son, still sleeping peacefully despite the noise of the shutdown procedures. I don't know yet. I've spent 3 years avoiding attention. The idea of standing in front of cameras and reporters scares you? Feels unnecessary. I didn't do what I did today for recognition. I did it because someone had to.
That's exactly why you should do the press conference.
Chen shouldered her bag.
The world is full of people who do things for recognition, for the applause, the awards, the social media likes. It needs more people who do things because they're right. And when those people are willing to stand up and be seen, it gives permission to everyone else who's been hiding in the shadows.
That's surprisingly philosophical.
I've had a long day. Philosophy happens when I'm tired.
Chen extended her hand.
It was an honor flying with you, Thompson. If you ever need a co-pilot again, you know where to find me.
Marcus shook her hand. Thanks, Chen, for everything. Thank your son. He's the one who told you to show them. She smiled and headed for the exit.
Take care of yourself, Thompson, and take care of him.
Then she was gone, disappearing down the stairs and into the night. Marcus sat alone in the cockpit for a long moment, listening to the sounds of the aircraft settling, the cooling metal, the residual hum of electronics winding down, the quiet breathing of his son behind him. 20 hours ago, he had been a janitor, the invisible man, the single father who had traded everything he was for everything he thought his son needed. Now he was something else. Not a hero. Heroes were made of different stuff. But maybe something more valuable. A man who had found his way back to himself.
Dad?
Marcus turned. Jalen was awake, rubbing his eyes, looking around the empty cockpit with confusion.
Where is everyone?
They left. It's just us now.
Are we home?
We're home.
Jalen stretched and climbed out of the jump seat. That was real, right? Everything that happened today? I didn't dream it?
It was real.
And you're going to be a pilot again? For real?
For real. Part-time at least. Enough to keep my skills sharp and help people like Ms. Sterling avoid disasters.
What about the janitor job?
Marcus smiled. I think I'm done with that. They walked down the aircraft stairs together, father and son, into the warm night air of the airfield. The crowd had dispersed, but Simon was still there, waiting by the hangar entrance. Mr. Thompson, Marcus. Simon stepped forward, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and relief. I wanted to thank you, personally, for everything. You already thanked me this morning. That was before I understood what you'd given up to be here, before I knew your history. Simon paused. I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did today.
The diagnostic skills, the calm under pressure, the way you took control when everyone else was falling apart.
I just did what needed to be done. That's what makes it remarkable. You didn't do it for glory, or money, or recognition. You did it because the machine needed you, and you were the only one who could hear it. Simon extended his hand. If you take that advisory position, and I hope you do, I want you to know that I'll support you completely. Whatever you need, whatever changes you want to make to our procedures, I'm on board. Marcus shook his hand. I'll hold you to that. Please do. God knows we need someone to keep us honest. Marcus and Jalen walked through the hangar, the same hangar where, just that morning, Victoria Sterling had pointed her manicured finger and turned Marcus into a punchline. The equipment was still there, the tools, the aircraft maintenance logs, but everything felt different now. Or maybe Marcus was the one who felt different.
Their old Honda Civic was waiting in the employee lot, right where Marcus had left it that morning. It looked smaller now somehow, less adequate.
Dad? Yeah?
Are we going to get a new car?
Marcus laughed. Why? Is there something wrong with this one?
It's got 200,000 miles on it. The air conditioning doesn't work, and the radio only plays one station.
Those are character features.
Those are broken features.
Same thing. Marcus unlocked the car and they climbed in. But yeah, maybe we'll look at something newer, when the advisory salary kicks in. They drove home through quiet streets, the late hour emptying the roads of traffic. Jalen fell asleep again within minutes, his head lolling against the window, exhausted by a day that had contained more adventure than most people experience in a lifetime.
Marcus pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building and sat for a moment, looking at the unremarkable structure that had been his home for 3 years. It was small. It was modest. It was nothing like the life he had lived before, when he'd worn a flight suit instead of overalls and commanded machines worth more than this entire building. But it was home. And home, he had learned, wasn't about square footage or prestige. It was about the people inside. He carried Jalen up the stairs and into the apartment, laying the boy on his bed and pulling the covers up around him. Jalen stirred but didn't wake, his face peaceful in the dim glow of the hallway light. Marcus stood there for a long moment, watching his son sleep. The same son who had known the truth for months and kept it secret to protect his father's feelings. The same son who had told him to show them. The same son who had called this the best day of his life. "I love you, buddy," Marcus whispered. "More than flying. More than anything." He turned off the light and walked to his own room, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at the locked drawer in his nightstand, the drawer that held his ATP license, his military commendations, the physical evidence of a life he had tried to leave behind. He opened the drawer. The license was there,
right where he'd put it 3 years ago. A little dusty, a little yellowed around the edges, but still valid, still his. He picked it up and held it in his hands, feeling the weight of everything it represented. The training, the sacrifices, the triumphs and the failures. The person he used to be and the person he was becoming. Then he stood up, walked to his wallet, and slipped the license inside. It belonged there. It always had. The next morning, Marcus stood at the back of the press conference, watching Victoria Sterling announce her merger to a room full of reporters and cameras.
Jalen stood beside him, wearing his cleanest clothes and trying very hard to look like he belonged among all these important adults. "And I want to acknowledge someone who made this day possible," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Someone who, 12 hours ago, was sweeping our hangar floor. Someone I dismissed, mocked, and humiliated in front of my entire staff." The room went quiet. "His name is Marcus Thompson. He spent 15 years as a decorated naval test pilot before choosing to become a janitor so he could be present for his son. Yesterday, when my aircraft failed and my engineers couldn't find the problem, he stepped forward. He diagnosed the fault. He fixed it. And then he flew me across the Atlantic Ocean to make this meeting possible." Victoria turned and looked directly at Marcus. "Marcus, would you please join me up here?" Jalen grabbed his father's hand and squeezed. "Go, Dad. Show them." Marcus walked to the front of the room, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on him. The cameras flashed. The reporters scribbled. The executives who had laughed at him that morning now looked at him with something entirely different. Victoria stepped aside, giving him the microphone. "I'm not good at speeches," Marcus said. "I'm better with machines than words. But I want to say something to everyone out there who's ever been made to feel small, who's ever been judged by their title instead of their abilities, who's ever hidden parts of themselves because they thought it was the only way to survive." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Your value isn't determined by your job title or your salary or the clothes you wear. Your value is determined by who you are when it matters. When someone needs help, when something needs fixing, when the truth needs telling. The world will try to put you in a box, give you a label, tell you what you can and can't be. Don't let it. You're more than any box. You're more than any label. You're more than anyone else's definition of who you should be." He looked at Jalen, standing at the back of the room, watching with pride. "My son taught me that. 8 years old, and he understood something I'd been too scared to see for 3 years. That being yourself, all of yourself, isn't a weakness. It's the only real strength there is." Marcus set down the microphone and walked back to his son. Jalen threw his arms around his father's waist, holding on tight. "That was amazing, Dad." "That was terrifying." "Same thing," Jalen grinned. "That's what you taught me." They walked out of the press conference together, father and son, into a morning that felt like the beginning of something new. Behind them, the reporters were already buzzing with the story. The janitor who saved the jet. The invisible man who turned out to be a hero. But Marcus knew the truth was simpler than any headline could capture. He wasn't a hero. He was just a father who had finally stopped hiding. A man who had remembered that the sky didn't care about titles or uniforms or what other people thought. The sky only cared whether you had the courage to fly. And Marcus Thompson had found his courage again. Not in a cockpit 30,000 feet above the ocean. Not in the applause of strangers or the respect of executives who had once looked through him like glass. He had found it in the eyes of an 8-year-old boy who had never stopped believing in him, even when he had stopped believing in himself. That was the truth that mattered. The only truth that had ever mattered. Some men spend their whole lives chasing greatness, never realizing that greatness isn't something you chase.
It's something you become, one choice at a time, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Marcus Thompson had made his choice, and he was finally home.